Okay, everybody, welcome once again to another Trans Am show, and I'm delighted to welcome on board into the Trans Am community, Juan Manuel Correa. Delighted, one of the American hopefuls for Formula One, and now trying a little bit of sim racing, and we'll explain why perhaps in a few minutes' time. But first and foremost, Juan Manuel, you just raced Barcelona for Trans Am, and you are very much a Formula 2 driver. So how was that experience of some muscle cars?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Jonathan. It was definitely something different, but I must say I enjoyed it very much, and I surprised myself a bit with how competitive I was. I didn't do much practice. Yesterday I had some issues with the sim, so I couldn't practice at all. So I actually did maybe 20 laps before quali, and I put it P5, and in the races the pace was quite okay as well. But I must say, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and what's incredible to me is that it actually gives me the sensation of adrenaline that a real car would in a way. So it's very nice.
So let's talk a little bit about, for those of you who don't know, we met during the Toyota Racing Series. And as I mentioned at the top there, you are one of the young Americans aspiring to make it into Formula One. You've been racing in Europe and you made it up to the dizzy heights of Formula 2. Tell us a little bit about your background first and foremost.
Yeah, so I was born in Ecuador, but my dad is American, and we live in Miami actually. And I was racing originally here in the US. That's kind of where my karting career took over. Then I went over to Europe, raced go-karts there for a couple of years. And then I went up the ladder of Formula 4, GP3, and eventually making it up to F2. So actually, when I met you in New Zealand, I was about to start my second season in GP3. So that was a couple of years ago. After that season in GP3 in 2018, I actually made the switch to F2, which was a bit of a gamble because I was the driver with one of the youngest ones and with the least experience of the whole field. But actually, I did quite well in the season last year until obviously I had the crash, and that kind of stopped my whole world for a few months. And that's where I'm at right now, with the rehab and just trying to get back into it.
I was just wondering, during the races, you started karting in the States. Are any names familiar to you, like JP Southern or any of the young guys that we've got racing? I mean, who did you race with in karts growing up?
Yeah, well, I know JP Southern. He was one of the first names I recognized, but I think he was maybe he's a year younger than me, if I'm not mistaken. But the people I grew up with here in the U.S. Was Devlin DiFrancesco. I raced with him since we were probably 8 or 9 years old. Then Logan Sargent, I'm sure you know him as well.
Sure.
People like Oliver Askew, raced against him. Kyle Kirkwood. So a lot of guys actually. Pato Ward, who's in IndyCar as well. So I'm kind of in that school. So yeah, it's very crazy to see. The different paths that we have all taken. Some of us are in Europe, other of us are here and established in the US, like Pato doing IndyCar, which is very cool to see. But yeah, we're still quite good friends. It's like a little community at the end. Is the people that you grow up with, so it's nice.
Well, when we know your story, if you cover Formula 1 and Formula 2 and Formula 3, we obviously know your story, and it's been a big story in motor racing, as we all know. And I'm sure you've done this a few times, but for our Trans Am viewers, tell us a little bit about what happened at Spa and how it has put your career on hold for now. But obviously, it's great to see you back. But tell us first and foremost what happened at Spa.
Yeah, so basically, it was a big crash. There were like 3 or 4 cars involved. I was one of the last cars to be involved, but unfortunately, I was the one that brought the biggest hit into the crash. So a car spun out in front. Then Antoine Hubert tried to avoid him, ended up flipping the car, going into the wall. And while all of this was happening, I was coming up the hill. This was in Oruge, going up Oruge in Spa. Many people are familiar with that corner. And as soon as I reached the top of the hill, some debris flipped my front wing. My front wing went under my car. So I lost control of the front tires and just went straight into a T-bone crash with Antoine's car. Unfortunately, Antoine passed away right that second. and I nearly lost my legs. So my whole tub of the car was broken in half. You know, my legs were fully exposed. Very similar to the Sanardi incident many years ago. And yeah, from injury point of view, I had a lot of injuries, but the main thing were my legs, especially the right one. I was very close to losing the leg. And if you want, I can show you what it looks like right now. So
Yeah, why not?
yeah.
Tell us what. Just show us me what we're looking at.
So what happened was I broke the leg here in the tibia, but the impact was so big that the broken bone disintegrated. So I actually lost nearly 10 centimeters of bone. Yeah, so I had a big gap. So with this device, they were able to grow new bone amazingly. So they cut the bone in a healthy part and then they stretch it out from that part onwards. So now I regrew the 10 centimeters and I'm just waiting for the new bone to become hard enough to stand my own weight now. So it's been a long process and it's still a long process to go with a lot of rehab. And I've had, to be honest, I don't know how many surgeries, 15 or more surgeries so far. And I would say probably another 8 surgeries to go. And then probably 1 more year of rehab.
Now, I don't want to get into the gruesomeness of it, but I did watch a video where you described how throughout all of that incident, you were conscious. And that must have been, I don't know, in some ways, you know, you racing drivers are a different breed. You probably preferred to be conscious because you were aware of what was going on. But they then put you into an induced coma, which you were in for 3 weeks. And there had been talk during that time, because I kept a watch on it, knowing you, of amputation. Tell me about how you managed to talk to the doctors and see if you could save it.
Yeah. So yeah, I was conscious, but to be honest, I would have much rather be unconscious because of the pain I was going through. That was very scary. And yeah, I actually didn't go into the coma immediately after the crash. So I woke up the next day in the hospital after the crash, after the first few surgeries I had. And the coma came like 3 days later, and it was due to an injury I got in my lungs because of the G-force. So it was a totally separate thing. And that's when I went into the coma. It was 2 weeks, 15 or 16 days. So yeah, when I woke up from the coma, that's when I had to make the decision, you know, with the doctors. Obviously, it took me a couple of days to kind of regain consciousness after the coma because of all the drugs they put you in to be in that state. When you wake up, you're out of it pretty much for like 4 or 5 days. So once I kind of regained my mind, it was a serious discussion we had to have, you know, and they were pretty forward about it. They told me, you know, the leg is destroyed, you know, it's on the edge of having to cut it off, and we can either try to save it, but first of all, the surgery was going to be very long and very risky because I had been in the coma because of my lungs, so I actually had a risk of dying during the surgery. Or the other option was to do a short surgery and just do a reconstructive amputation, which was the easy way out. And probably I would have been walking a few months later with a prosthesis. So, you know, I obviously, for me, was an easy decision to try to save it, because I'm always like this, you know, I'm a fighter, and I was like, let's do it. And thank God, up till now, everything has gone like we planned, even better, that the recovery has been slightly faster than we anticipated. So it seems like it's working out.
And, you know, we obviously followed Robert Kubica's comeback to Formula One, and ligaments was the big thing with him, was whether he was able to, you know, get the strength in his arm. Where are you likely to end up with your leg? And can you, I mean, what kind of percentage are you, you know, hoping to get back to normal?
Yeah, for me, the main thing is actually the ankle and the cartilage. So that's the big issue I will have in the future. Because, you know, bone regrows and it becomes just as good as the bone from before. So that's not going to be an issue. But my ankle broke in quite a few pieces. And there is obviously cartilage damage that comes with that. So it's difficult to tell. It's difficult to tell. At the beginning, the doctors told me probably my ankle will not move at all ever again. So I will need to have a fusion of the ankle. But it already moves much more than they told me it would never move. So yeah, I'm optimistic, and you know, it's useless for me to sit here and say this is how it's gonna end up, because you never know. You just have to believe in the best. I'm doing the most I can to get it to that stage. But one thing is for sure, and that's that I'm gonna be able to drive again with or without ankle. You know, I mean, you have people like Billy Munger driving without two legs. I am sure gonna be able to drive again. So that's definitely something that has kept my spirits up for this whole time. That's kind of my big motivation at the moment to come back.
I get real solace for you and another man recovering in motor racing, Robert Wickens, to see you guys taking to the sims and effectively getting back in the public eye. How important for you personally and psychologically has it been to be able to do something in racing that gets you back in a seat?
Yeah, it's been important, and you know, it's been a nice commodity to have. It's not a must in the recovery, but you know, for me, the main challenge with the sim racing was obviously that I cannot use my right leg. So it was kind of working around that. I found that the best thing for me is to just use the left leg for both throttle and braking. So that's how I'm driving now. And everyone kind of finds their own, like Robert, he gets the brake with a paddle, and you know, everyone kind of does it their own way. And to be fair, I hate to say it, but this virus at the moment, in a way, is something positive for us, because it just buys us time, you know. At least for me, I feel like it would have been much harder mentally to watch all my colleagues continue their paths in F2, probably some of them making it into F1, where I would have wanted to be, while I was here sitting on the sidelines. So at the moment, I'm just kind of using this break from real life, which we're all going through, and just using it to push as much as I can with a rehab and trying to get ahead.
I'm sure you've thought this far ahead, but have you ever thought that as you go back and return to F2 racing, that you may change the pedals so that because you've got so used to using your left foot, and you'd actually just move them so that you could be a left-footed driver?
No chance. No, I mean, I must say I adapted quite well with my left foot, but there's definitely a disadvantage there. If anything, you know, if I would never be able to use my right leg at all, I would probably find something to do throttle with a hand, because I think that's still more efficient than just one foot. You know, there's a lot of times when you have to be rolling because you're switching so much, and that's not ideal. So no, but definitely I thought about the kind of adjustments I would have to do. You know, for example, if I didn't have the ankle movement, what I would have to do to still push the throttle with the leg. And there's ways to go around it. You know, I have the knee, I can maybe push it like this, use my hips a bit. So yeah, we'll see. It's still a bit far off, but it's definitely something that I give a lot of thought to.
And tell me a little bit about the rehab. What kind of things are you doing? Because I find it's not a morbid fascination. It's more that I find racing drivers quite inspiring to anybody with an injury, because you're so determined, all of you, to get back to being, you know, your fit as possible. So tell me how you're pushing yourself, and tell me how you're going about your rehab.
So the first thing, I kind of planned out my whole rehab journey since the beginning. And the first thing I told myself was, okay, since I'm going to be in a wheelchair probably for the next year or more, the least I can do is get my upper body back to the level I was before. So when it's time to rehab the legs, I'm ready to go with the upper body. So that's kind of what I focused since the beginning. And actually at the moment, I dare to say that I'm pretty much at the same fitness level, upper body wise, as I was before. Maybe lacking a little bit of neck, but that's something I'm working on still. So and with the legs, it's always like progressing, you know, because the farther along you are, the more exercises you can do, the less pain you have, etc. But it's definitely a very painful process. I mean, even more than I would have hoped so, and than what I thought. You know, I can take a lot of pain, but there are some days when you just want to punch the therapist in the face. But yeah, you just have to work through it. And you have to listen to your body. I think that's something very important. One thing I've learned in this few months is that doesn't matter what the doctors or the therapists say, who knows your body the best is yourself. And there have been many cases when the doctors tell me to do something or the therapists that tell me to do another thing or to take it easier, but I know myself, and I think that's also a bit of an advantage I have due to the racing and all the training I was doing before, also physically, that I know my limits, I know my capabilities. So, I'm doing 3 times more therapy than the doctors told me to. And at the beginning, they're like, oh, you're gonna be counterproductive, you're gonna make it worse. And now 6 months later, they tell me, wow, like you're doing an amazing job. So for anyone that's going through something similar to me, not only with the legs, but anything, just listen to yourself, and you're the one that knows best what to do.
Well, listen, delighted to have you on board. And on behalf of John Claggett and the rest of the Trans Am community, you are always welcome to come and race with us. Do you think you'll have another go at it? Because I guess it was a bit of I think Devlin Di Francesco, your friend, said, go and give it a go. Will you give it another go?
Most likely, yes. I'll watch my schedule, but yeah, I like to. Yeah.
Let me ask you question I'm asking a lot of drivers, especially drivers who probably have some sim work as you would do under their belts. But what is the biggest difference? I mean, it's great for you to keep your hand-eye coordination and just to keep honed. But what is the big difference for you, sim racing versus the real thing?
What is the biggest difference? I would say the environment. There's many factors in real life that you simply don't get in the sim, such as G-force, the helmet, the wind blowing moving your head, also the view you have in real life. At the end of the day, you with computer screens, you cannot simulate being in a place perfectly. So that's the biggest difference from feeling wise. Technical driving wise, I would say probably the lack of feedback with the movement that you get in the sim. The sim is, you have to get used to getting your feedback more visually and using only the steering wheel. Whereas in real life, it's much more about instincts and the feedback that your gyro, your internal gyro gets from the movement of the car. So it takes a bit of getting used to it, but I must say, like, for example, this software, Assetto Corsa, it's unbelievable how realistic it is, and how, I realize maybe some things that sim drivers don't realize, but for me as a racing driver, when I drive the F2 car in this software, I open the DRS and I can feel the steering wheel become a bit lighter, exactly like it is in real life, which is crazy, that they have that amount of detail. And that when I tried that for the first time, I was like, okay, this is not a video game, this is proper. So yeah, no, like I said, you can have, and you're watching it, you can have really good races in here. And when you're in there in the fight, it gives you that adrenaline, which is what we love. So that's what most of us do it when we're home.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned adrenaline, because I was going to ask you about that, because when you are real life racing and your life is on the line, your instincts kick in and your fight and flight kicks in, which is a natural, your senses are heightened when you are in that stage of anything, any form of competition like that, where your life's at risk. Obviously, with a sim game, your life's not at risk. And I wonder, you mentioned you get the adrenaline, but how hard is it to replicate that heightened senses?
Well, you get the adrenaline and you can get the pressure, because pressure and adrenaline don't have anything to do with really senses. But it is true that, for example, in the real car, once that race starts, you kind of transcend into a new level of awareness, if we can call it that. At least that's what I feel. And in the sim, you don't really get that far, because you're missing all the things that I told you, like G-forces, wind, sound, movement, all that kind of things. Those are the things that kind of put you into this next level mental state. So yeah, definitely that's maybe some sim drivers are able to get into that state. But for me, since I'm a real race car driver, I don't get into that state yet. Maybe with some more practice, I can improve.
I ask all the drivers this. What's your rig? You mentioned you like a set of Corsa, so that's good news. But what else? What is your physical setup?
I can show you a bit. It's quite a standard sim. So I have Fanatec direct drive engine, the Fanatec F1 steering wheel. Then my pedals are made by AIS. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah.
They're in-house, decent pedals. The thing that I like the least about my sim setup is actually that I have a big TV screen instead of a monitor.
So this is something. 3 screens.
No, I just want a big monitor, curved monitor. But the problem with a TV is that it has the rate of refreshment is much lower than a monitor, so it feels like a bit laggy sometimes. So it's not ideal. But
have you tried VR?
I have tried VR. I think it's very realistic, but it gets me a bit dizzy. I start to sweat a lot. It gets blurry. For longer races, sometimes I put it on just to do a few laps and have a laugh. But for proper sim racing, I much rather do it on the screen.
Well, Juan Manuel, we've heard about your recovery, and I don't want to dwell on it, but I would like to get your take. You've been watching a lot of racing. I'm sure you've been watching F1. What do you think about all the shenanigans, Vettel and so on and so forth? You obviously know these guys pretty well, and you keep an eye on them because you're in that field of people wanting to be in Formula One. What do you rate to the last week of changes?
I called Vettel's retirement already a year ago. I said that it's coming. Although it's not an official retirement yet, we will see. But I think if I was in his shoes, he's Vettel, he's a 4-time world champion. You're not gonna go now to a mediocre team to be fighting midfield. So it's most likely a retirement for him. I am surprised by the choice to take Sainz in by Ferrari. The first time I saw it, I was like, wow, I was expecting Ricciardo to go there. But the more I think about it, the more sense it makes. Because I think they didn't want a number 1 driver to be together with Leclerc. So, they've made it very clear that Leclerc is their future. That's who they're putting all their cards on. And kind of Sainz is the perfect number 2. But the real question is, will Sainz actually be a number 2 or will he give Leclerc the heat, because Sainz is not a slow guy, definitely. So we will see. We will see. It's very interesting. But for me, the most interesting thing out of all of this is, obviously there's seats getting opened up. So who's going to Renault now? How is that going to change the market? Because for me, maybe some of my colleagues from F2 will get the chance to go up. Who knows? So that's very exciting.
Yeah, that is very exciting. And what about the F2 field? How competitive is it? Who do you respect and maybe see as being somebody we should pay attention to? Because obviously you're going wheel to wheel with them and have done probably for many years. So who is the talent in your mind?
Oh, there are many. There are many. When you get to that level, you're really at the cream of the crop. So most of the drivers in that category have won championships in the lower series, and in a good car, most of them are capable of getting good results. Who's to watch? It's hard to say because there has been a lot of changes as well since last year in F2. You have people like Deletras, I think it's his 4th year. So obviously he should go and win that championship now. You have other like rookies coming up, such as Armstrong and Lundgaard, which we know are very quick drivers as well. So it's going to be interesting how they compare. So yeah, really, it's such an interesting championship, to be honest. And the only thing I can think of is I would love to be there to give him a bit of heat as well and try to be on that hunt for the F1 seat. But maybe I'll have to wait one more year.
And I'm sure you're keeping an eye on Indy because that has just the youngsters that have come through with, you mentioned Pat O'Ward, you raced against him in the past, but Colton Herta, there's so many good youngsters and people like Marcus Ericsson who are making their way, Felix Rosenquist. It really is an interesting era for Indy.
It is. I think there's like a boom in IndyCar as well, if I'm correct. And it is a very attractive category, I'll tell you that, because now, obviously, I'm officially separated from the F1 world, for at least for now. So of course I've seen at other options and where I want to make my comeback. And although still my aim is F2, I never rule out IndyCar because it's an amazing championship and it's gaining a lot of traction over here. And they're also interested in young drivers like me, you know, American coming from Europe, because we bring, I think we bring something different than just the drivers that have raced in the US their whole life. And that just makes the category better and the level keeps getting higher. So yeah, it's definitely very, very interesting.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, obviously the Drive to Survive has been huge in America for Formula One. And I think it's brought in a lot of mainstream fans to Netflix that have never really followed or looked at Formula One. And it's creating quite a few new fans. Now, there's an F2 series coming out called Chasing the Dream, which you'll be in. Do you think it'll have the same sort of impact, that we'll get to know some of these drivers a little bit better because we're getting to, you know, learn about them and it's not just about the racing?
Well, I certainly hope so. You know, the only issue there is that it's not going to be streamed in a platform like Netflix. But hopefully in the future, they can do that as well. Because, you know, when you watch Drive to Survive and all the drama that goes on and what makes that documentary so good, you can have the same content taken from an F2 season, because basically the same things go on. And there's just as much, if not more, drama and things happening, you know. So it would definitely be very cool if they could do a documentary, a proper full season documentary of F2 in the style of Drive to Survive. But yeah, I'm excited for people to watch this new F2 documentary. I've seen it already. It's very well done. It talks a lot about the crash as well. So for people that don't know really what happened, it's good if they can watch that and understand. So, and yeah, the most important thing for F1 and that enterprise as a whole is to make new fans, like you said. And definitely I see a big difference, you know, friends of mine here in Miami, for example, that back then, you know, a couple of years ago had no idea what F1 was. And now they see the series and they think they know everything about it and they're mega fans. So it's pretty cool. It's nice to see.
And any more rumors about the potential of a race in Miami? I know they've been trying.
Yeah. It's a work in progress. It is a work in progress. At the moment, they're thinking about doing it in the Hard Rock Stadium, so a bit up north. The plan to do it in downtown is definitely off the table. It would have been too much of a hassle for the whole city. But yeah, I'm definitely in favor of there being one, even if it's a little bit up north, because it would be a home race for me. And in general, I think it would be an amazing race for the series.
Finally, Juan, tell us a little bit about racing a Trans Am car at Barcelona, because you've got experience. All right, it's sim racing, but you've got experience of Barcelona in the real world. But how did it handle?
If I'm being honest, after the first 3 laps, I said, this thing's a boat.
Don't worry, you won't be the first single-seater driver to compare it to that.
And the thing is also, I had the race this morning, which was in a V8 car, a Formula V8 car, very, very quick car. So I was jumping back and forth between, and every time I jumped in a Trans Am, I was like, oh, you know. Yeah, it takes a bit of getting used to, but I think if you're a single-seater driver, it's easier to make the switch to a GT car than vice versa, because it's just a simplified single-seater and a heavy single-seater. There's nothing more to it. And yeah, I enjoyed it. Like I said, it was good fun, good racing, and good level as well. I was surprised the guys in the front, they were quite quick. So I always like a challenge.
Good. Well, listen, I'm sure you've made quite a few more fans now in Trans Am, and certainly on our radio show, Speed City, which we cover Formula 1, Formula 2, and Formula 3. You are one of the Americans we're keeping an eye on. So for our audience, just tell us a little bit about how we can find you and follow your road to recovery and learn a little bit more about when we hope to see you on the real grid.
Yeah, I'm on all social media channels. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And I'm quite active, especially now during the quarantine. I'm quite active on all of them. But no, I'm keeping everyone updated with a rehab and all that kind of thing. So yeah, you can find me there. And I thank you in advance for all the support, because honestly, the support from the racing community and the world in general has been unbelievable throughout this whole process for me. So I'm very thankful for that.
Well, listen, Juan Manuel Correa, thank you so much for talking to us, and best of luck with your recovery. Stay with Trans Am. You're always welcome. We're evidently going to some pretty funky tracks that not many people have heard of, some of which are even closed now. So we're going back in time. So I think you should join us.
Awesome. I'll see you there. I'll see you there.
All right. Thanks, Juan Manuel. Stay safe. Enjoy Miami, and get well soon, sir.
Take care. Take care. Bye-bye.